Is it dangerous being a private investigator? Well, the simple answer is it all depends. I get asked this question a lot, so I want to go through some of the things of why I think it may or may not be a dangerous profession to be in. But before we go into the risks and the dangers, let's go over some of the pros and the cons to being a private investigator today. Let's just start with the good stuff. Independence. That is a huge one. As a private investigator, you are your own boss. If you have your own business, you can set your own schedule, and this allows for a great deal of flexibility in your schedule. That's one of the things that I love the most about being a private investigator, because I can do what I want, when I want, schedule what I want for the most part. And then there's the variety of work. Every case is different. Yeah, you might do surveillance, and every case you're going out and you're sitting in your car and you're getting video of people and you're taking photographs of people and you're following people, but every case is different. If you do criminal defense, everyone that comes to you on the desk, every case that comes across your desk is going to be different. They all have different flavorings and different pieces and different parts to it, and that is really enticing for a lot of people because it actually presents new challenges and new opportunities for us to learn and for us to expand ourselves as a private investigator. Problem solving in a lot of different types of jobs is kind of a real pain because you don't want to go to work and have to figure out, well, why doesn't this work, or what went wrong over here. You just want to do your job. But private investigators, they enjoy that mental stimulation, if you will, from problem solving. It requires critical thinking. It requires quick thinking. It requires a lot of problematic thinking. And most private investigators really enjoy that in their career. This video is sponsored by OREP Insurance and Working PI Magazine. OREP is a leading provider of private investigator liability insurance. Visit orep.org for a quote today. Autonomy is something that's huge too. I enjoy the freedom to work with as many clients or no clients as I want. I get a wide variety of clients. I get a wide variety of cases. And I can choose and I can pick, or is that pick and choose, which ones I take and which ones I don't take, because I have my own business and I can decide what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do and when I'm going to do it. The sense of professional satisfaction is huge to being a private investigator. When you know that you are helping people resolve their problems and uncover the truths, that can be incredibly rewarding. Now, not every case works out the way you want. Not every case works out the way your client wants, but being able to get to the bottom, to get to the facts and present that to your client, that in itself can be very satisfying because you've helped your client get to the truth, even if it's not the truth that they were hoping for. Now, if you're a PI and you're working for another firm, there's usually opportunity for advancement there too. You might start off as just the surveillance investigator or just the person going out and doing neighborhood canvases, but it might allow you to move up into other positions within that organization. But there's also the opportunity for advancement within your own company, even if you are a one-man shop like I am. I started out doing surveillance, but because I was doing surveillance and because I was looking for other ways to be a better surveillance investigator, I ran into other ways to educate myself and get training on other types of investigations, and I was able to advance my career in my own company, creating new types of investigations that I can go out and do. And that is really huge for me because I wasn't stuck doing the same old thing all day long. I would have a hard time myself just doing surveillance for 25, 30 years. That's why I've gotten into other things like criminal investigations and interviews and accident investigations and TSCM, technical surveillance countermeasures, bug sweeps, things like that. Flexibility is something that I touched base on a little bit too. My schedule is very flexible for the most part. I can decide when I'm going to work and when I'm not going to work. I schedule all my work. I try to schedule every hour of every day of my work days so I know what I'm doing. But I'm not stuck having to do just this and just that and on a schedule. I'm not on a 9 to 5 all the time. And having that flexibility is really nice for my personal life because I got a lot of things going on in my personal life with family and friends and church and everything else. And one of the things that I have always considered myself to be is a constant learner, a lifelong learner. And you have a constant, ever-going, ever-growing learning opportunity as a private investigator. If you take advantage of the trainings out there, you take advantage of associations like your Private Investigators Association in your state and things like that, you'll be able to advance a lot of that educational part of being a private investigator. And this is a big one too, meeting interesting people. As a private investigator, you will encounter a very diverse range of clients, witnesses, you name it, suspects in criminal cases, all kinds of people. You're going to meet them in just about every walk of life. So if you like meeting interesting people, if you like talking with interesting people, if you like working with interesting people, well, being a PI might be the career for you. And personal growth, I kind of have touched on that a little bit, but I know the work can be emotionally challenging at times, but it can be very personally rewarding. And it's helped me expand on a lot of my own personal things in life. It's made me a better person, if you will. Well, let's talk about the not so good stuff, the cons to being a private investigator. One of the first ones that comes to mind is the emotional toll. You could be dealing with a lot of traumatic and disturbing cases, and these can take a very emotional toll on you, especially if you do a lot of criminal defense or domestic cases, things like that. I don't do as much criminal investigation as I used to. I still take on some cases. I found that a lot of those cases were in the domestic realm, so a lot of them were involving spousal abuse, child abuse, different things like that. And that can take an emotional toll on you. You have to have a very strong stomach and a very strong mind. And now I talked about flexibility of scheduling, but there can be some really long hours too. If you're doing surveillance, for instance, generally you're going to be going out and doing at least 8 hours in the field of surveillance. Well, if you have 2 hours to drive on each side, well, now you're up to 12 hours a day. And then if you have to pull your video and edit your video and write a report at the end of each day, well, now that 12 hours is 14 or 15 hours. Even if it's a 2-day case, which most surveillances are, you now have 30 or more hours in that one case. Now, you may have gone into it thinking, well, I'm just going to go out and I'm going to do this, but it's going to take up all day. So you may not be able to pick up your kids when you're supposed to. You might have to have someone else pick up the kids from school, or you might have to adjust some of your personal schedule for that. Another area to look at when you think about long hours, especially if you're doing a lot of criminal investigations, is as the investigation proceeds, as the case gets closer to trial, especially on big cases, all of a sudden you can find yourself working long hours every single day that are dictated by your client. They're going to tell you, we have to have this, and we have to do this on this day, and we've got court on these days, and you have to be there. And now all of a sudden those long hours have started to intrude on your personal time. Financial uncertainty is a huge con to being a private investigator too. I don't want to make it sound all doom and gloom. You can make a lot of money as a private investigator, but it's not a steady paycheck coming in every week, every month, something like that. In your private investigations business, you're going to have ebbs and you're going to have flows in business. You're going to have days when there's money coming in, weeks when there's money coming in, months when there's money coming in, and then days, weeks, and months when there's nothing coming in, or way more going out than what's coming in. You have to learn to budget accordingly. Kind of tied to financial uncertainty is the uncertainties of benefits, if you will. As a private investigator working for yourself, you are not going to have things like health insurance, dental insurance, eye insurance. You have to figure out how to make sure that those things, those emergencies, are covered for yourself personally, because you're probably not going to have that insurance. Now, hopefully you can get on a spouse's insurance or something like that, but if you have to find it for yourself, it can be very, very expensive. Now, you can try to self-insure yourself, make sure you have, you know, $20, $30, $50, $100,000 in a savings account for an emergency that comes up. Now, at my age, if I was to get on my wife's insurance, it would really be cost prohibitive for me to do that. It would be astronomical. Her employer pays a good portion of her insurance, but they wouldn't pay a portion of mine. What I do myself is I go through CHM or Christian Health Ministries, and to that, it isn't actual insurance, and they're not a sponsor of this channel or anything, but I very much believe in them, and if you're a Christian, you might want to look at this as well. They're not an insurance company, rather they are a partner of Christians helping Christians take care of themselves in a biblical and a godly way. A good example, back a few years ago, when I got COVID, I went to the hospital for 10 days. I had even longer months, many months of recovery after that. But I went to the hospital for 10 days, and when I got out of the hospital, I had nearly $80,000 in hospital bills. Because of my membership in Christian Health Ministry, everything got paid 100%. Now, it's not an insurance, it's not guaranteed. They don't cover things like doctor's visits and prescription visits, but when you really think about a lot of that stuff, going to the doctor once or twice a year and getting a prescription for an antibiotic or whatever is very minimal compared to spending $400, $500, $800, $1,000, $1,200 a year, or a month, I mean, on health insurance. So that might be an option, and if I think about it, I'll leave a link down below for them. Being a private investigator can be very physically demanding too, especially if you do surveillance. You might think sitting in a car for 8 hours a day is a pretty easy gig. And in a lot of ways it is. But in a lot of ways it's very hard because you're all bunched up. It's not like you're sitting in a recliner and you can stretch your legs and you can get up and you can go for a walk and you can, you know, grab a cup of coffee and grab a snack whenever. You are sitting usually in one position, a very uncomfortable position, for a very long time. So you have to think about those physical demands. I know for me, I can't do surveillance anymore. I cannot sit out there physically for 8 hours a day in a car any longer. And then there's stress, high stress levels. You have all the pressures of delivering the results to your clients on the deadline that they want. And there's a lot of pressure in that because the clients a lot of times expect this outcome and you go out and you get this outcome. And that's what you're supposed to do, and you present that to them, and they're not always happy. Usually they are happy because they found out without finding out the bad way about the situation, but a lot of times there's a lot of pressure in those deadlines and delivering those results. There's a lot of stress also on that financial piece that we talked about. When I first got started, I worried a lot about money. When I first got started, it wasn't like I was all of a sudden making a six-figure income. My first year as a private investigator, I think I made less than $10,000. My second and third year, probably less than $20,000. It was after 3 years in the business when I really started to see some marked improvement in business as I started to get more experience, and I was able to really turn it into a true full-time job. And something that kind of ties into that too is job security. You have very limited job security. Now, as a business owner, I'm not going to fire myself. There's times I've thought about it, but I'm not going to fire myself. But you just never know in this business if you're going to be in business. I talked a little bit about when COVID came around and when I went in the hospital, the whole pandemic situation really did change my views on job security. Now, I have been one that's always been preparing for the worst. My motto is hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. So I had plenty of financial resources, and I had some other things in the wings that I knew that I could do to be able to pick up some money. But the job may not always be there. And if you're working for somebody else as a private investigator, that job security may be even less, because the person that you're working for may retire, may go out of business, may get sued, may not have anything to do with you, but they may get sued. They may have a client that just stops using them, a client that goes out of business. A perfectly good example, I know a large PI firm in Denver that went many years reliant on one large insurance company for doing all of their business. Insurance companies will go out and review their vendors from time to time, and they'll decide on if they're going to keep them. And this particular insurance company had made the decision to just go with one or two larger firms to do all of their surveillance investigations. And that decision made this other company, even though it appeared to be a large company, they weren't really a large company, it was a mom and pop operation. They ended up having lost this client because that insurance company went out and gave it to two very large national firms. So all of those people that they had working for them on a subcontract basis suddenly had no work coming. And they were used to getting 1, 2, 3 cases a month, or even in some cases a week from them. Confidentiality concerns is something you need to consider too if you're considering being a PI. You are going to handle a lot of sensitive information, and you must be able to maintain confidentiality and protect that data to the best of your ability. And this really is a heavy burden to carry. And I know some private investigators that have gone mad trying to figure out how to best protect every possible threat out there. I'm not quite that way. I have some very good policies and procedures and software and even hardware in place to protect everything of mine, but I try not to let it overburden me. But I've known some people that it can become very overburdening on them to make sure that everything is protected. And then liability risks. As a PI, you face liability on every case that you take. I, have never been sued by anybody. I've never been threatened to be sued. Luckily, I've never had to sue any of my clients or anything like that. But the risk really is out there. There's a lot of liability risk. And that's why it's important to make sure that you have insurance coverage as a private investigator, because that limits a lot of your risk. And make sure you have a business too. If you're in business, make sure you at least have an LLC or a corporation. An LLC is fine. It's a limited liability company that protects you like a corporation. Because if you don't have those things in place and somebody does go after you and somebody does sue you, then they can go after your personal assets. A lot of times having those things in place will make somebody not sue you because they know that they have limited things that they can go after in that suit. And this is one that I have heard some private investigators worry about, and that's reputation risk, especially if they are involved in a lot of high-profile cases. If you make a mistake and you're working for, Joe Bob Roberts out of Hollywood, California, just a made-up name, by the way, and you make some big mistake, it could end up all over the news. It could end up in court, and it really could damage your reputation. And damaging your reputation in this business is a pretty big thing, because once your reputation is gone, well, chances are your business is gone. So taking all of those things into consideration, let's now look and say, is being a private investigator a dangerous job? It can be in some cases. Usually it's not, but it can be in some cases. One of the things you need to worry about is the possibility of physical confrontations. As a private investigator, you may need to go out and engage with suspects in cases. Obviously, you're going to be dealing with witnesses in cases. Some of them may become aggressive and even hostile, and they may even threaten physical harm. Now, I myself have never had anybody attack me, But I've had some people act like they were considering attacking me. I had one case, and I made a video about this a while back. It was actually on a process serve where a young man came out of his house and he was telling me to get off his property, and as he is walking towards me, he's got his hand on his back hip like he's going for a gun. Now, I had another investigator that was videotaping all of this, and I kind of knew a little bit about this young man, so I didn't really think he had a gun, but the possibility of it was there. We had another one, and strangely enough, it involved a process server as well. One of our process servers had went out to serve papers on this guy and was knocking on his door, I don't know, 6, 7 o'clock at night. It wasn't that terribly late. And the guy decided, for whatever reason, to let his dogs out the back door, and they came around and attacked the process server. He didn't get harmed bad. He did get a little bit of a cut. Things were much worse, though, for the guy getting served after the police were called. And we've talked a lot about surveillance. There's what we often refer to as high-risk surveillance jobs. If you're conducting surveillance on a high-profile individual or in a sensitive location. These types of surveillances can really expose you as a private investigator to a lot of dangers. Harassment while you're on the job, and potentially even physical violence. We had one case one time where there was 3 of us doing a surveillance, and it was actually on a personal injury case, but the subject that we were surveilling ended up actually being part of a notorious gang in the Denver metro area. And at that time, we had had multiple, to the tune of about a dozen individuals, and multiple vehicles had approached one of our investigators. And approached is kind of a nice word. They actually chased him down the road and chased him out of the neighborhood. Digital risk is something else we have to make sure that we consider. As technology advances, PIs are exposed more and more and more to digital threats, to cyber stalking, to hacking, to being targets of organized groups, things like that. Now, all that said, I'm not talking doom and gloom about being a private investigator. I just like to be honest with people. It's not all glorious every day. You're not always out solving the biggest crimes out there. You don't always find the smoking gun, and you're not always saving the day. Most of our days are pretty boring. A lot of it's doing paperwork, sitting at a desk, doing desk work and things like that. There are dangers to it, I'm not going to lie. But that danger is also going to be limited to the types of work you do and how much you expose yourself to it. Myself, I don't take on that many high-profile cases anymore. I used to do a lot more of it, but as I'm getting older, I don't really need all that extra heartburn and all those extra things to worry about, so we're not taking on as much of that today. Now, if you want to know more about what it's like to be a private investigator, well then check out this video.